Good morning, welcome. Thank you for coming to this session. My name's Martin Booth. I work for a company called 3Sharp. We've been working really closely with the Microsoft Azure team around how they position Azure, and in particular the demos that you see the Microsoft field folks doing, but also things that you can get your hands on as well. One particular thing we've been looking at is how stories get told through the demos. How many of you have been in the immersion experience and tried the hands-on labs and things like that? Nobody been in there yet? Oh, you ought to check it out. There's some great stuff in there for learning about the technology and actually getting in and playing with it and seeing how it all works. But one thing we've been talking with Microsoft about is how we can actually help them tell customers stories through demos. You've seen case studies on Microsoft.com, you've played with the technology and things like labs, but we're trying to bring the two together to actually have demos that tell the story about what customers have done with Microsoft technology. So I'm going to run through a demo that we have for API management, and it will actually take you through a story of a customer, what one particular customer did, and then actually show you kind of how API management helped with that. So I'm going to run through that. If I just get rid of my one and only slide. This demo is actually available on a site called handsondemos.microsoft.com. On this site, there are some of the normal kind of technical demos that you might want to go and play with to see how things work in Azure. But we have this one here, creating and managing new business models. And this is, you have to log in to see it, I'm afraid. This is the demo I'm going to run through that actually talks about the story side of things and then walks through API management. So later on, you'll be able to go and actually have a play with this demo yourself and follow kind of the steps I've taken you through. It provides the click steps, the step-by-step instructions, but also the script and the talk track so you can read about what's actually happening as you experience it as well. So in terms of API management, the story we've got here is around a company called Earth Networks, and you can read the case study on Microsoft.com. It's got all the usual details about the kind of things they did with API management, the benefits they found for it. But we really wanted to bring that to life with a story. So Earth Networks, they have a huge amount of data within their enterprise. They manage lots of weather stations across the country that provide very rich information. They store all that in their wonderful data management system they have on premises. But they really wanted to make that available to their partners and to people who could consume that information easily, but also generate money for them. They wanted to monetize the information that they've got sitting in their enterprise. Now, I'm sure many of you have lots of data sitting within your company. A lot of it is internal and you use it kind of for your own purposes, but there's also data that a lot of companies have that they could actually share with partners. Another example is an electricity company that Microsoft have been working with that have a lot of data around when people use electricity and when peak demands are on the electricity grid. They're enabling access to that information through Azure so that people can subscribe and get information around when peak usage is, which means things like TV viewing. When people take the breaks and go and make themselves a coffee in the advert breaks, that information is being captured by the electric company, and that's useful to the TV network. So being able to resell data that perhaps you haven't thought about is a great opportunity for you to think about new business models. In terms of API management, Azure API management is a capability available through the Azure portal. You can see the portal screen here. I'm not actually going to take you through the Azure portal experience for API management because some of this is still in preview, and it would mean I'd have to switch between the old experience and the new experience. So I'm actually just going to take you through the old experience that's currently available, but eventually, pretty soon, most of it is going to be migrated through, and you'll be able to experience it in the new portal. But I'm going to start off with the developer side of things. So my company here, Contoso, has an API that is being published, and as a developer, I might want access to that information. So Contoso, through API management, have made a portal available to developers. Now, the important thing is Contoso, who have all this data and want to publish it, didn't have to do anything to set up this portal. It's all part of API management. When you set up an API in API management, this is all generated for you. It can be branded and customized, so it can look like your company. So Contoso might have wanted to put their color scheme and their logo in there. But really, it's about enabling quick access to developers for information on your API. So as a consumer of the API, I can go and click in to see what API is available. And Contoso have made this airport service API available. If I click into that, as a developer, I can see this documentation around it. Now, traditionally, when you're trying to consume an API that another company's providing, the documentation can be really hit and miss. It may be of varying quality and varying use. So API management actually generates all this documentation for the developers. So you can see what the request looks like, what the parameters could be. There's even sample code generated for it. So if I'm developing in PHP, I've got code here that I could just drop straight into a test framework or my application to actually try this API out and have a play with it. So very quickly and easily, a developer can consume the API. One of the really cool capabilities is this button that says try it. So right from this portal, I can go and enter a value for an airport code. I'll use Seattle. If I scroll down, you can see the other parameters. I'll leave those as the defaults. Here's the information about what the request is going to look like, and I can hit send. So without writing a line of code, as a developer, I can actually try out this API and see how it responds, and also see the entire payload that's returned to me. So I can see here, Seattle Tacoma International Airport, current weather's 56, northeasterly 4.6 miles per hour wind. This is real live data that's being returned as well. So I can see the structure of the data that's coming back. So developers can very quickly and easily get that information and have a play with it, try it, and see how it works for them. On the publishing side of things, what did Contoso have to do to set this up? Well, we have this publishing dashboard, and first thing I'll just point out is this section down the side where it says Developer Portal. This is actually where you'd go if you wanted to customize that Developer Portal and brand it to your experience. You can drop your own content in there, some widgets. You can set it up how you want. So when a developer goes to the documentation for your API, they can very easily kind of get the experience that you want them to have. In terms of publishing the API, if I go and look at the details behind it, we can see here a quick graph of the activity that has been. You can see the demo I did on it last night showing up there. If I drill into settings, this is where I've actually set up the API to be published. You can see the name and the description that were available in the developer portal. I've got the URL here for the service, and you've got the API down the bottom here of what it would look like. When I actually set up this environment, I just imported a Swagger definition file for the API here. So if you've got services that you've set up, just grab the Swagger file, upload it into API management, and it will generate all that developer portal for you. So again, you don't have to write any code or do any complex configuration to get that up and running. If I look at operations, this is where I specify the actual operations for the API, and I've got my get airport operation here. You can see how that's set up, the description that was displayed in the developer portal. There's also the ability to configure the parameters that are required for the API here. So again, things like the description will be passed through to the developers. One very important aspect is the caching. Now, when you're providing an API with lots of rich data, there might be a subset of that data that's actually not changing very frequently. In our airport example, that might be a mapping table of the city names to the airport codes. That data's not changing, so there's no point the developers consuming that API actually hitting your infrastructure to get that information back. So you could just turn on the caching here, and that would actually store that data up in Azure. So when your developers are calling the API for that particular data, it will get pulled from Azure rather than being pulled from your infrastructure. Now, of course, things like the weather data that is changing rapidly, you do want that to be up to date, so you might not have that cached up in Azure, but Azure will act as the proxy to pass the request through to your data source that you manage. So you can choose kind of how much load you're going to take and how much you actually want to offload onto Azure based on how fresh you want that data to be. The next tab over on the API is security. Now, of course, if you're looking to monetize an API, you can't just have it free and open for access. So it supports all the usual kind of things. We've got OAuth 2 support, OpenID Connect support there. There's also the ability to do HTTP basic or certificates for the access there. So it might be that you're publishing your API through a couple of means. You might have a free version of it where somebody doesn't authenticate and they get limited access, a certain amount of data or a certain volume of data. And it might be that you've got an authenticated tier of access, where you're going to authenticate someone by one of these methods and then provide them more access to that data. So you're totally in control of how much access people have, and of course, you can then turn that into something you can monetize. The next tab over is issues. Now, the developer portal has the ability for a developer to actually submit feedback on your API. It might be they've got a problem with it, they don't understand how it works, there's a question, or a request, they want something new. They can submit that easily through the developer portal. It shows up here in your publisher portal, and in this you can actually go ahead and just have a full two-way conversation with it. So you can respond to that, post your own comment back, ask for more context. So there's a whole back and forth you can have with the developers that are consuming your API. And again, you don't have to set anything up to do this, it's all just part of API management. Now, I mentioned about doing different types of products. So you might want to monetize it in different ways. I've just got a single product here that says, hey, subscribers can get access for 5 calls a minute and 100 calls a week. So again, you might want to think about, okay, I've got a free tier where people get a limited set of calls per week or per day or per minute, and it might be I've got a premium tier that I'm going to just open the door and allow people to get access to whatever they want. So through this, you can very easily set up these tiers, which you can then of course, control how you wish. If I go and look at the policies that are actually applied to that, I'll select my API, the Airport Service API, select my operation, get airport. You can see there's an XML document here that's created for us. And I've got a policy in here. I'll just go and remove that. That's from left over from the demo I did last night. Just quickly take that out. What I can do is, I've got a list of policy statements here. There's all kinds of things that I can actually set on this, which will enable me to control what kind of access the developer gets to the API. I'm going to select the limit calls option, limit call rate per key, and it drops the appropriate XML in here. I'm going to set my number of calls down to 3 and 60 seconds. So I'm going to limit somebody calling my API to just 3 calls every minute. I'll just go and get rid of these bottom 2 lines because I don't need them. And save this policy. So now I've got a policy that's being applied to my product, my starter tier for my API, which is going to limit me just to 3 calls for my API. If I flip back to the developer portal here, and I go down here, we see the send request I did before. If I click on that, click on it again, click on it a 3rd time, you can see I'm still getting the 200 OK. If I click on it a 4th time, I get my 429 too many requests message back. Yeah. So there you can see kind of the policy kicking in, stopping me accessing that API as a developer because I'm on that tier that has that specific policy applied. And again, you can see down here the response content that's come back, the return message there. So as a developer, if I'm testing this API and trying out the policies and trying to push it, I can see exactly what's going to happen if somebody pushes it beyond its breaking point, which means I can then incorporate those use cases in my error handling within my code. If I flip back to the publishing portal here, we've got the analytics tab. This is where, as a publisher of my API, I can go in and see the data about how people are using it. So you get very rich graphs here. Let me just go and look at the past 24 hours or so. You can see last night, I was doing this demo in the expo. It wasn't quite as late as 9 p.m. This must still be on Seattle time. No, not quite. But you can see kind of the access there, and there's the access I've just made here. So you get both the kind of the call count and the response time here. Very simple, at a glance view of the stats here. But I can also drill in more. If I go to usage, I've got the ability to filter this right down. Probably the most interesting part is the fact you get this graph here of the access across the world. So we can see where my API is being called from. And we found with a number of customers that they're looking to monetize our API, but it'll happen differently depending on the geography they're targeting. So it might be that they've got one set of tiers with an appropriate pricing, an appropriate access model for the US. It might be that Asia has a different set of tiers, Europe has another set of tiers. So through this analytics, you can actually see how that's all being consumed and adjust your business model to match. So it's very flexible in the way you can set it up, the way you can control it, and what you can do to allow access to your API. Just the final thing to show is kind of we've got a number of stats here around kind of the calls, so you can see who's coming in on what API, whether calls are being blocked by policy, different types of calls. So again, very rich reporting information that you can get back through there. So that was kind of a whistle-stop tour through API management. As I mentioned, this is the current portal environment. It is going to be migrating through into the Azure portal itself. So the UI will change, but the capabilities will stay the same or actually be enhanced in some cases. But it's a great way for you to take data that's within your company and provide it through to consumers of those APIs. Now, we found some companies, when they're moving to Azure, are picking up workloads and just dropping them in the cloud as they are, which is a great option if that's what suits your business. Some companies are actually looking at taking their workloads and as they take them to the cloud, breaking them down into microservices. And we found some customers have actually found that when they break their data down and architect it as microservices, those microservices themselves are actual potential candidates for data to be shared with partners. So, for instance, the energy company, taking kind of their traditional billing usage database, as they break it down into microservices, they can expose some of that information and actually share it with their partners through API management. So as you're looking at the cloud and looking to migrate workloads to the cloud, think about what's actually in your data and are there new potential opportunities there for you to use that data to help your customers, help your partners, and actually maybe help your bottom line as well. So think very carefully about that when you are looking at moving workloads to the cloud. So that was my very quick run through. As I mentioned, this demo is available on the URL. Let me just zoom in so you can see it nicely. So handsondemos.microsoft.com. As I say, there are a number of demos there that go through various aspects of Azure from a technical perspective, but we are going to be looking at putting these story-based demos up there as well. So you can read a bit about the story of Earth Networks and how they use this. You can then walk through the demo yourself and experience what it means to kind of publish an API, such as the airport service API that I had here. And I do recommend going and checking that out. And we are going to be releasing more customer-based demos on more areas of Azure, so you can go and play with other things that perhaps are of interest to your company and see how somebody else implemented certain aspects of Azure. So that was my session. Thank you all for attending. I'm happy to take any questions you have. If you want to shout them out, I'll answer, or you can come up and see me at the podium. Yeah?
You mentioned that it will be coming to the Azure portal, but is there a schedule for that?
Is there a schedule for it coming to the Azure portal? The API management team, last time I spoke to them, they just said it's coming really soon, and a lot of it has been lit up already. There's just a few areas like the analytics that aren't there yet. Their answer to me has been that it's coming soon. If you want to grill them and actually get a very specific answer, I know they are in the expo, so if you go and check them out in the apps and infrastructure section of the Microsoft Showcase, they might give you a more specific answer than they've given me so far, but it should be really imminent. I'm hoping in the next couple of months. Okay? Yeah?
Swagger, do you support Swagger 2.0 or is it Open API 3?
So the question is, does it support Swagger or is it Open API? Yes, both. I actually set this demo up by importing a Swagger definition file. So yeah, if you've got Swagger files, you can just upload them and have an easy play with them. Okay? Yeah? Okay, so the question is, does it apply security to the documentation? Yeah, let me just, if I flick back to this, the documentation page, you can see up the top here, I'm actually signed in as the administrator, so I've got access to all of it. It might be that you want to only allow certain developers access to certain things. If you're using authentication on your APIs, people will only see the APIs in here that they've got permissions to see, so yes, totally. Okay, no more questions? Oh, one more.
Is the uploading of that Swagger JSON file a manual process, or is there a way to automate that?
Is the uploading of the Swagger file a manual process or can it be automated? I did it manually when I set it up. I would like to think there's probably some automation, probably PowerShell underneath, especially given as when you move things to the newer Azure portal, all the APIs have to be underneath for CLI and PowerShell support anyway, so I hope they've published a PowerShell commandlet or an API for it. I don't know for sure. Check with the API management folks, they'll answer it for certain for you, but I would hope that it's been automated. Yeah.
How do you identify the OAuth2 identity provider?
I personally haven't actually been through the setup of that. I'm more of an Azure generalist than a specialist on API management, so that's going a bit deeper than my knowledge level. So again, I would say check out the booth at the expo, and the experts there can answer your deeper question. Yeah?
What identity providers can you use or how?
Again, that's kind of going deeper than my knowledge level on that, I'm afraid. So do check out the expo. Okay. All right, thank you for your time. Thank you for watching this session. Enjoy the rest of Ignite. Thank you.